What's good, people? We got another Ask FP. And before we jump into the questions, I want to ask y'all to please don't forget to leave a like. I would love to get 100 or more this time. So if you dig it, please leave a like. If you don't, it's okay. Like I always say, and like Common said, if you don't like it, you don't like it. It don't mean that you hate. So let's jump into the question of the week. And it comes from my man Simen Torve Sundlan. And he asked me, who are the top 10 most enjoyable players to watch in the NBA all time? Now, I'm translating that to the most exciting players, and I not only listed the 10, but I ranked them, and I'm only going to go by people that I've actually seen play. So I say number 10 is a prime Derrick Rose. Prime Derrick Rose was spectacular to watch, finishing at the basket, just crazy speed. Number 9 would be Steph Curry. Number 8 would be Kobe Bryant. He was very, very exciting to watch in his prime. Number 7 would be Dr. J. Yeah, I'm old enough to actually have seen Dr. J play. So there you go. Number 6 would be Jason Williams. White Chocolate was dynamic to watch. Number 5 would be LeBron James. Absolutely the greatest athlete, single athlete to ever play the game, in my opinion. In the same category with Wilt, in my opinion. Magic Johnson would be number 4. Number 3 would be Allen Iverson. Most exciting little man probably ever. And number 2 would be Vince Carter. I mean, every night almost, it was sports in the highlight. Number 1 is MJ. So a little bit behind, jumping up and catching up with Dominic. This might be his first question. Welcome to Ask FP. He says, will T-Mac and the aforementioned Vince Carter make the Hall of Fame? That's an interesting question, man. I actually think Vince Carter has a better chance to make it. I think it's longer, more sustained success. The higher point of he reached the higher point, I think, at his prime. His teams had more success. I think T-Mac is, you think about it, he never won a playoff series while he was the man. Jumping on, teams later in his career, I think with the Spurs or whatever, late in his career, he was able to get, more team success. But whenever he was the guy, his teams were first round exits. So I don't know. I mean, you could definitely make a case for him, but I think Vince Carter definitely gets in. Not so sure about T-Mac. Victor Daniel Torres says, do you think it was a mistake for the Bucs to fire Lovie Smith? I think it might have been a little early. I do think it might have been a little early. But some things you never know. Lovie seems to come off to me as a guy who is very stubborn and loyal to a fault to his coordinators. He's never, ever had what you would think is a good offensive coordinator, and he's even had the freedom to hire his own guys. So if he's going to be stubborn in that way, and he's not going to pick guys who get the job done along with his defense, which I do believe works if you have the right personnel, then he does kind of paint you into a corner. But that's information we don't necessarily have in totality. So Tavonne Stanfield, which I also think is a new addition to the Ask FP. What's up? He says, what are your thoughts on the Rams moving to Los Angeles? I feel sorry for the people in St. Louis. I do. I can only imagine what it's like to just lose a team. Thankfully I'm in Chicago, where that's probably not going to happen, even though there is some conversation about maybe the Chicago White Sox potentially moving at some point. But yeah, as far as, it only makes sense though for the NFL, the biggest sports business out there in America, to have a team in LA. It only makes sense. It's crazy that it went this long without one, but I do understand and feel for people in St. Louis. The name is James. Hit me with a one gotta go. Gary Payton, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, or Allen Iverson. Gary Payton and Jason Kidd would definitely not be the people that I would eliminate from here. For me, it would come down to Steve Nash or Allen Iverson. It's very difficult. It's really difficult because Nash was a poor defender. And I think he's the only person on this list that would be categorized as a poor defender. Allen Iverson wasn't a great on-ball defender, even though he did lead the league in steals and had a career filled with tons of pilfering, basically. Whew, but I don't know if Nash is a much better shooter than Iverson. If he shot as much as Iverson, he probably could have scored just about as much, maybe. That one's real tough. I'd probably have to say Nash would be the one I'd say have to go, but that's tough to say. The name is James, says, do you consider Jerry West a point guard or a shooting guard? And he's giving me a little bit of help saying he is a point guard. I would definitely say he's a point guard. If you look at the team, and he did play shooting guard, but if you look at the teams that he played on predominantly, he played point guard more often than he played shooting guard, if you just look at the teams. So there's a lot of guys who, like, at the end of Michael Jordan's career, he played small forward, but most people are not going to call him a small forward. They're going to call him a shooting guard because that's what he played the majority of his career. So I do think you should go with the position that the guy played the most time at, and for Jerry West, that would definitely be point guard. Jarrod Young says, who has better handles, Steph Curry or Chris Paul? Now, you got to look at this a few different ways. Are we talking about pretty, stylish, fancy handle, or are we talking about controlling the ball and not turning it over? Or are we talking about a combination of the two? If we're talking about, like, Steph handles are clearly more flashy and prettier to watch. Chris Paul doesn't do as many, dynamic moves with the ball, but we look at turnovers, both of guys take care of the ball pretty well. I would still say, if you're just talking about controlling the basketball and not turning it over, I would say Chris Paul has the better handles. But if you're going to combine the two between the flash and the substance, I would say Steph. So it just depends on what you want. WD9JO, I think he's new as well. We're getting a lot of new AskFPers. That's a good thing. That's a reason that kind of explains to me why this may have been the largest turnout of questions I've had. I had to eliminate some, and it was difficult. So I'm happy people are picking it up. He asked, if Shaq would have stayed here in Orlando, do you think we could have won a championship? Absolutely. I think that's one. Well, see, here it's more than just that contingency. There's another one. Penny Hardaway would have had to stay healthy. Now, yeah, we could have thought and said, yeah, well, Shaq would have probably gotten another running mate to run with. But you can't just put any running mate there. Shaq didn't win a championship without Kobe, and he didn't win a championship without Dwayne Wade, even though he was a shell of himself when he won. But Penny and Grant Hill are the two biggest basketball tragedies from an injury standpoint in the history of, like, at least the last 25 to 30 years. Both of those guys would have been in the same category as the LeBrons, as the Kobes, all of the guys, the post-Mike guys. They would have been in that category had they not gotten hurt. And that's why I know for a fact if Shaq had stayed and Penny had stayed healthy, they would have won a championship. Brady Babin says, will you ever do a Legends roster on Madden? Why or why not? That's a really good question. And I'm going to tell you this, Brady, I've been giving it some super, super serious thought, but I've learned my lesson from past little ventures that I've done here on YouTube, not to share anything before I'm sure of what I'm going to do. So just know this, that's something that is absolutely been on my mind. So just stay tuned for further information. Parker Nelson says, which team gets the number 2 seed in the East and the number 8 seed in the West? Now, this is a really good question, and it may seem like it's kind of like out of the blue, but if you take a look at the standings in the NBA, you'll know why Parker asked this question, because there's so many. It looks like Cleveland's running away with the top seed in the East, but the number 2 seed in the East could go to probably any number of 6, maybe even 7 teams. But I do believe that when it's all said and done, the Bulls are going to get the number 2 pick. I do. I think, even though I hate to see Joakim Noah get injured and be out for the season, I think that it's going to help to regulate their rotation. And you'll see Bobby Portis get the minutes that he earned and deserves. Number 8 seed in the West, I believe that it's probably going to be Utah. I think Houston's going to somewhat get things together, and I think Utah settles in as the 8th seed. Sergey, also a new addition to AskFP, and he got another Steve Nash question. He says, is Steve Nash a top 10 point guard all time? I went ahead and ranked him, and in my opinion, he is either 10th or 11th, and he's going back and forth with another former Suns great. But I got Magic number 1. Oscar Robertson, number 2. Isaiah Thomas, number 3. He's one of the most underrated guards ever, really. We got John Stockton, number 4. Now, Tiny Archibald deserves to be in there. He's even more underrated than Isaiah, to be honest. The only man to ever lead the league in scoring and assist in the same season. We got Jerry West in there. We got Gary Payton, Steph Curry, Chris Paul, Jason Kidd. So I actually it's like he's either 11th or 12th. So I guess he's not a top 10 point guard because I got him right in there mixed with KJ. So I mean, if you look at, you might think, oh well, he had way more assists than KJ. Well, actually, no. KJ averages has a higher career assist average than Steve Nash does. We also know KJ is a better athlete, but we know that Steve Nash is a better shooter. So I don't know. But I would say, I had to recant my initial statement. No, I don't think he is a top 10 point guard. 11th or 12th is where he is. Sergi again says he's very Phoenix Suns centric today. He says did Mike D'Antoni's Phoenix Suns underachieve? I think so. You got one of the greatest point guards in Nash. You got Amari Stoudemire in his prime. You got one of the great stat sheet stuffers ever in Sean Marion. And they were perennial contenders, but I think they were missing the defensive element, maybe a defensive-minded assistant coach to inject a little bit of that into their team, and maybe that's what gets them over the hump. Even though they did get some bad breaks during the playoff runs, weird losses to the Spurs and stuff like that. So Sergi again says, if Brandon Roy and Greg Oden would have stayed healthy and never left Portland, would the Blazers have a second ring by now? That's a pretty big if, because it's assuming that if Greg Oden never got hurt, he would have panned out to be the guy who they thought he would be. Brandon Roy, we saw he was a very, very good, close to great player before he was hurt. So we know what he would have been. Greg Oden, we don't know, so it's kind of hard to say that. If he became what they thought he would have, then yeah, I can say, I can definitely go with you on that. One more from Sergey. He says, what are the best and worst run organizations in the NBA? I think this is actually pretty easy. The best run organization is clearly the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, obviously they've had some good fortune with drafting a guy like Tim Duncan, who has been so good for so long. But for them to continue to come up with late round picks and undrafted free agents, that shows their scouting is on point. The higher the staff that they've hired in terms of Popovich, then you look at the assistant coaches that have gone on to have success from under him. It's more than just Duncan. It's more than just Popovich. It's more than just the scouting. Their culture, everything is tight. The worst run organization is easily the Philadelphia 76ers. I understand the whole situation about tanking, but when you're tanking, it still doesn't explain why you draft big men 3 straight years. Noel, Embiid, and Okafor. It makes no sense. So I don't understand that at all, and I don't get anything that they're doing, to be honest. Jarrod Young says, who's better, Brandon Ingram or Jaylen Brown? I think Brandon Ingram is a better basketball player, but I think Jaylen Brown is a better athlete. We'll find out if the two can balance and then who becomes the better pro at that point. But right now, I'd probably say Brandon Ingram is a better player, but I think Jaylen Brown has a higher upside. King Hype says, players like Mike Vick, Aaron Hernandez, Josh Gordon, would they have been superstars at their position if it wasn't for jail time / suspensions? Well, I think Mike Vick was a superstar. I don't think that's like even a question. I think he at his height he was a superstar. His height would lasted multiple years. So in Atlanta before he got in trouble, and then for a year or two in Philly. So I definitely think he was a superstar. I mean, he holds records the most rushing yards for a quarterback, several different things. He was a superstar. Aaron Hernandez was one of the best pass receiving tight ends before he got in trouble, for sure. Josh Gordon, not quite at the same level as those guys, and hopefully the book isn't closed on Josh Gordon. And God bless all 3 of them. Hopefully they can make the best out of their lives. I think Vick has rebounded quite well. And, maybe Josh Gordon just needs to grow up a little bit, and you just have to pray for Hernandez that he gets himself together. Nothing is impossible with God. Jarrod Young says, who should be an all-star starter, Kawhi or Draymond? This is really tough because Kawhi is having an amazing year for an amazing team. But Draymond is having an amazing year for a team that has the best record in the NBA and is on pace to break the best record in the history of the game. Draymond has all of those, 5 triple-doubles, somewhere in there, 4 or 5 triple-doubles, playing great. It's hard. I would have to probably say Draymond. I would probably have to say Draymond deserves to be the all-star starter for what Golden State has done this season. And you can't diminish what the Spurs have done. They've been amazing too. But, I think them having a better record is the tiebreaker at this point. Jarrod Young says, what if LeBron stayed in Miami and they played Golden State in the 2015 NBA Finals? Who would have won? I hope I didn't say Jarrod. I meant to say Jarrod because you already told me it was Jarrod. I think Miami wins. And I think Miami wins because defensively, that team doesn't get enough credit for how good the Heat were defensively that year. They were really, really good defensively. And I think that Dwayne Wade could really, really make Clay work on the defensive end. And of course, here's the thing. When Cleveland lost to Miami last year, there were several very, very close games that Cleveland could have won. And in a sense, LeBron was playing by himself almost on offense. If you put Wade and Bosh and Chalmers on the floor, I think they win. And you were even talking about an even younger LeBron who had the best season of his NBA career. Yeah, I think Miami wins. Tristan says, what is the best NFL, MLB, and NBA game you ever watched? I had to think about this. Was a really good question, Tristan. The best NFL game I watched was Super Bowl 42 when the Giants beat the Patriots 17-14. The Patriots had the perfect season, the David Tyree catch on the helmet, the crazy eluding of the blitz, the pass rushes that Eli Manning did. It was an amazing game. Everything that was at stake made it even better because the Patriots were trying to finish a perfect season. The best NBA game, Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals, Michael Jordan's last shot with the Bulls. They beat Utah, I believe it was 87-86. Just to show you how times changed, no team in any game in that series scored over 96 points. It was crazy, crazy defensive battle. The best baseball game was the AL Division Series in 2001, Game 3. That was the Yankees won 1-0. They beat Oakland. They were down 2-0 in the series in a best-of-5 series. So they won 3 straight. This was the first of 3 straight that they won. And that was also the game where Derek Jeter's flip play to the plate to cut down a runner, which obviously was a huge run. The name is James, says, do you think LeBron could have been even better if he went to college? Now, that is a pretty interesting question. And for a lot of guys, the answer to that would automatically be yes. But for a guy like LeBron, who is truly like once in a generation type of a player, I don't think he needed it. From a basketball standpoint, I don't think he needed it. Maybe from a maturity standpoint, he might have. Maybe he might have from a maturity standpoint. But it's hard to say that too because he's never been in any trouble. The worst thing anybody can say about LeBron is they didn't like his decision. No pun intended. So, but not as a basketball player. Greatness GFX1 says, do you think that Melo is a Hall of Famer? Yes. Yes, he is. He may never win a championship, but you can't argue with, I'd have to look at his rookie year, but I don't think he's had a year in his entire career where he averaged less than 20 points a game. In 20 points, 7 or 8 rebounds a game for this long. He's been arguably the best offensive player in the game, probably 75% of his career. With a career that runs parallel to LeBron James, that's pretty significant. Simen Torve Sundlan says, how long on average does it take to create a player in the Legends roster? Looking forward to it. I love that question. I really do. It takes me probably about somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour per guy. So that's a long time. You know, I mean, when you're talking about the rating them, making the face, then, well, that's if you're talking about making the footage that I use for the creation videos. But if you're just talking about rating them and making the faces, then I'd say about 40, 45 minutes. But then making the videos, add on another 15 just for the footage. Now, I'm not talking about how long it takes to edit the footage, but just to capture the footage, add on another 15 minutes. So, yep, between 45 minutes to an hour. Jarrod Young says, do you think the Clippers actually have a shot at signing DeMar DeRozan, considering they don't have a lot of cap space? Well, you know, teams are going to get creative to get the guys that they want. So if they believe that they can get DeMar DeRozan, they're going to go on a hunt to try to complete as many moves to clear cap space. So basically, cap space clearing moves. Try to dump guys for draft picks, try to dump guys for cash considerations, try to dump guys for expiring contracts, whatever they can do to be able to get him if that's what they want to do. I would think they would probably try to do all of that with the hopes that they can get either Durant or DeRozan. So obviously Durant would probably be he's going to be number one on everybody's list this summer. Deontay Rose says, with Sting being announced, being the first one announced for WWE Hall of Fame, what are your guesses that the other inductees could be? You know what, the WWE is really hard because they'll induct Jon Stewart or somebody who has never wrestled or whatever. So it's kind of hard to predict, but I don't believe the Honky Tonk Man is in. And I think that that's somebody who absolutely deserves a serious look. So you got to look at stuff like that. And then with certain guys, are you going to make everybody absolutely retire from active wrestling like the Undertaker? Does he really need to retire before you do that? I guess so, but I don't know. Deontay Rose says, thoughts on Fury's WWE style promo with Wilder on Saturday night and the chances the fight happens this year next. I think the chances that it can happen is late this year. I think that's probably more likely. I loved him coming to the ring. I mean, the heavyweight division is really on the rise, and he deserves a lot of credit for the reason why it's on the rise. He beat Klitschko no matter how unexciting or less than thrilling people say the fight was. He beat him, and his personality is one that makes you want to watch him. Whether or not you want to see him get knocked out or whether or not you want to see him win, he's somebody that you want to see, and that's what sells tickets. That's what takes boxing from being something that only the purists are watching to something that the casual fans are watching. And when casual fans are watching, then business is booming. The last question also comes from Deontay Rose, and he says, if you were running the Bulls right now, what moves would you make to compete for the title? Blessings as always, sir. Blessings to you as well. First and foremost, the Bulls need a dynamic wing player. And the guys that I'm looking at is three guys: Rudy Gay, Will Barton, or Gordon Hayward. Those three guys, I think, could change the bottom line for the Bulls. I would be looking to move Pau Gasol. And it's not because he's not a good player. It's just because he's already said he's going to opt out. And rather than lose him for nothing, he's a guy I would move. I'd also make Taj Gibson available. Doug McDermott would be available. And for the right price, so would Nico Mirotic. I appreciate you watching. God bless. Peace.